Welcome to John's Maths book. In this video, we're going to be looking at finding the square root of a number. So first, let's look at what symbols are used to denote square roots. So let's look at the square root of 4. So the square root of 4 looks like the number 4 with a big tick over it, and in the top left, there'll be a small 2. So how do we work out the square root of 4? We ask what number, when multiplied by itself, gives us 4. So let's see if we can work that out. So let's look at some numbers when multiplied together, see what they give us. So we'll start with 1. So 1 times 1 equals 1. 2 times 2 equals 4. So the number when multiplied together that gives us 4 is the value of 2. So the square root of 4 is 2. Now let's look at another example, and we look at the square root of 64. So again, we ask what two numbers when multiplied together give us 64. Now we've looked at 1 times 1 and 2 times 2. So let's look at 3 times 3 is 9. 4 times 4, 16. 5 times 5 is 25. 6 times 6, 36. 7 sevens are 49. And 8 eighths are 64. So that means that the square root of 64, so write it there, square root of 64 is equal to 8. The square root of a perfect square is the product of two identical numbers. So an example of this would be 2 squared is equal to 2 times 2, which is equal to 4. Now we know the square root of 4 is 2, so 4 is a perfect square. Finding the square root of a perfect square is straightforward, as we only need to find a number that when multiplied by itself gives us the perfect square. Another example of the square root of a perfect square is, let's take square root of 64. Now 64 is a perfect square. It's 8 squared, which is equal to 8 times 8, which is equal to 64. So the square root of 64 is equal to 8. So what is the square root of an imperfect square? The square root of an imperfect square contains fractions or decimals, but it can be simplified. So let's look at an example. Let's take the square root of 125. Now, the square root of 125 can be written like this. So it can be equal to the square root of 25 times 5, because 25 times 5 is 125. So this can be further written as the square root of 25 multiplied by the square root of 5, which can be written as this. We know that 25 is a perfect square, therefore the square root of 25 is 5. So we can actually work that one out. So we can say the square root of 25 is 5 multiplied by the square root of 5. Now the square root of 5 contains decimal numbers or fractions. So we can write the answer as 5 times square root of 5. Now every positive number has two square roots. Now why is this the case, you may ask? So let's look at an example. So let's look at the square root of 64. So we know that 64 is 8 squared, so 8 squared is equal to 8 times 8, which is equal to 64. But also 8 squared is equal to minus 8 times minus 8, which is also equal to 64. So therefore, the square root of 64 is equal to plus or minus 8. So for exercise number 1, let's see if we can find the square root of 49. So pause the video now and see if you can work out the correct answer. So hopefully you got the answer. So we need to ask ourselves, what two numbers when multiplied together give us 49? Now we know that 49 is a perfect square because 7 times 7 equals 49. So the two numbers are 7 times 7. So the answer is 7. Don't forget it's plus or minus because minus 7 times minus 7 is also 49. So the square root of 49 is plus or minus 7. So for exercise number 2, let's calculate the square root of 81. So pause the video now and see if you can work out the correct answer. So let's take a look at the answer. So again, 81 is a perfect square. So it's 9 times 9 equals 81. So the square root of 81 is either 9 times 9 or minus 9 times minus 9, which is also equal to 81. So the square root of 81 is plus or minus 9. So now for exercise number 3, let's look at the square root of 18. Pause the video now and see if you can work out the answer. So 18 is not a perfect square, so the square root of 18 will have a decimal or fractional part. But let's see if we can simplify this one. So we can see that 18, or the square root of 18, can be written as follows. So 18 is 9 times 2. So it's the square root of 9 times 2, which can be written as the square root of 9 times square root of 2. So we know that 9 is a perfect square, and the square root of 9 is 3, because 3 times 3 is 9. So don't forget it's plus or minus 3 multiplied by the square root of 2. So for exercise number 4, let's look at the square root of 48. So pause the video now and see if you can work out the answer. Okay, I hope you all got the answer. The first thing to note is it's not a perfect square, so let's see if we can simplify it. So 48 is the same as 16 times 3, so we can say it's the square root of 16 times 3. We can write this as the square root of 16 multiplied by the square root of 3. Now, we know that 16 is a perfect square because 16 is 4 times 4. So the square root of 16 we know is plus or minus 4. And that is multiplied by the square root of 3. And as the square root of 3 has got a fractional decimal part, we'll leave it as 3 square roots. So the final answer is plus or minus 4 square root of 3. So that concludes this video. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, then please share, like and subscribe. The next up video is going to be cube roots.